Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. I welcome to you all to our weekly sessions on Bhagavad Gita as it is. So today we would start reading chapter 9. Chapter 9 is the most confidential knowledge or the Rajguhya Yoga. So let's start. Verse number 1. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Idam te guhyatamam pravakshyami anusuyave jnanam vijnanam sahitam yagyatva mokshase shubhat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear Arjun, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart you to this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of the material existence. So, the first thing to understand here is that Lord Krishna gives this knowledge only to his devotees, and in this case, Arjuna ji is a great devotee and a friend of Lord Krishna, and that's why Lord Krishna is giving this knowledge, giving this intelligence to understand about this most confidential knowledge which we are going to read in the following verses. And the other thing to note here is that Gyatva Mokshase Ashubhat, which means that by knowing this knowledge, by practicing this knowledge, one would be free of all the material pangs and material anxieties. So, how that is possible? That is possible because this confidential knowledge is related to Lord Krishna, who is the possessor of all happiness, all opulences, and whatever is performed in relationship with Krishna or in relation to Lord Krishna, or whatever service is performed for Lord Krishna, that is also equally transcendental and equally blissful in nature. So, chanting the names of Lord, singing the glories of the Lord, reading about the pastimes of Lord and his devotees, everything is equally blissful, and that is why by constantly being in this devotional service, one would be gradually freed of all the material pangs, and that's why Lord Krishna assures that Gyatva Mokshase Yat Gyatva Mokshase Ashubhat. And here also word has been used Asuyave, which means to the non-envious. Now, the significance of this verse is that there are many commentaries and many editions of Bhagavad Gita, but we would find that in those commentaries or editions, the glories of Lord Krishna haven't been highlighted, or Lord Krishna, or the fact that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and we have to take shelter of Lord Krishna, this particular knowledge is not highlighted in those editions, and thus those commentaries are not helpful, because the persons who have written those commentaries are not giving the people the knowledge that the Lord is Krishna, and that is why they are, in a way, they are envious of Lord Krishna. They are not devotees of Lord Krishna, and that is why Lord Krishna stresses that he gives this knowledge only to those who are devotees of Krishna. So now we would go into why, or Lord Krishna would say why this is the most confidential knowledge. Rajavidya Rajgoyam Pavitram Midamuttamam Pratyaksha Avagamam Dharmam Susukham Kartum Avyayam. So Lord Krishna says this knowledge is the king of education, the most secret of all secrets. It is the purest knowledge, and because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, it is the perfection of religion. It is everlasting and it is joyfully performed. So this verse has been thoroughly explained by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, and we would also try to understand each of these words step by step. So the first thing, the first characteristic is Rajvidya. So this knowledge is the king of all knowledge. Why this is the king of all knowledge? Because this knowledge speaks about one's true identity, which is that we are the soul, we are not the external body. And then the knowledge introduces that there is a Supreme Lord who is the creator, maintainer and the destroyer of this whole universe. It's with his energy this whole universe is functioning correctly, properly, and thus we have to take shelter of that Supreme Lord, which is we have to rekindle our relationship with the Supreme Lord, because we are eternal parts and parcels of that Supreme Lord. So this knowledge is not provided easily, or it cannot be found easily in various philosophies or various schools of thought. This knowledge is not given so easily, or this knowledge is not available with the other within other philosophies, and that's why this is the king of all knowledge or king of education. And this is also Rajguhyam. So the Rajguhyam means it's the king of confidential knowledge. Now, why it is called confidential knowledge? Again, because there might be various schools and various universities and various subjects are taught in those academic institutions, but they deal mostly with this material world and the various phenomena of this material world and the upkeep of this material world. But there is hardly any schools or institutions where you would come across this knowledge about one's true identity, what is the destiny of one soul, how that destiny can be achieved. So this knowledge is not readily available everywhere, and that is why this is confidential. I mean, the different schools of philosophies themselves are confidential, and then amongst them is this most confidential part is our existence or our identity as the soul, and then we are part and parcels of the Supreme Lord, and we are always, our eternal relationship exists with him, but we have forgotten that relationship, and due to which we have to take birth in this material universe. But we have a chance in this human birth to realize this knowledge and to act according to the ways which would help us to develop that relationship with Lord, and thus we would be able to go back to that eternal kingdom. So this is the most confidential, so it's the most confidential knowledge, so that's why this is called Rajguhyam. Then this is Pavitram, or the purest. Why it's Pavitram? Because in scriptures like Padma Purana, it has been explained that when one performs any activities, there is a result to it, and the result might be achieved immediately after doing that activity, or the person might get the result after a few days or months or years, or even after a few births. So this whole process is compared to the sowing of a seed in the ground, and after a few days from that seed a little sapling comes out, and then from that sapling a plant grows, it gradually develops into a fruit giving tree, and then the fruit develops. So similarly, when we perform an action, it implants us, it is compared to the implanting of a seed, and gradually that the result of that tree manifests in the form of a fruit, and thus it goes through these various stages. And it is said that when we take to this path of devotional service or this path of bhakti, whether our actions are in the form of seeds, or whether they have grown into saplings, or they are about to give that fruit of that action which we have performed, so it cuts away, it takes out all those fruit giving trees of our actions. So all of those are vanquished if one takes to this path of bhakti, and as because all the sinful reactions are vanquished, that's why this is called Pavitram. And simultaneously it is Uttamam, which means transcendental. Transcendental because the bhakti or the devotional service to the Lord in the ways of chanting the names of Lord, or hearing about the instructions of Lord, or reading about the pastimes of his devotees, each and every one of it is related to Lord, and because they are related to Lord, that's why they have a transcendental effect. And because they are transcendental, that's why they are called as Uttamam, which means above the ignorance. Or if we break down this word Uttamam, which means Tamam means ignorance, and then Ut means to rise. So that means this knowledge is, or this whole process is transcendental in nature. Then it is Pratyaksha Avagamam, which means that it can be directly understood, or it can be experienced very easily. Now how it can be experienced easily? So we have seen there have been many devotees who have come to this path, who have taken to this process of bhakti, and they have realized the results. And even to all of you, you would have come across, or you would have seen devotees, the Hare Krishna people, who are mostly Westerners, but by taking to this path, they have achieved a much higher level of happiness. Now, how this can be explained? It's because the Westerners have a much higher level of opulence. I mean, they are born into opulent families, or they are generally wealthy. but they have they were not experienced that level of happiness which they were looking for, even after being in such a wealthy situation. And when they took to this path, they left all of their comfortable positions and riches, and they left their homeland and they came to settle in India. And that's why we see in holy cities of Vrindavan, Mathura, Mayapur, Dwarka, we would see many foreigner devotees who have been living there constantly. So we can understand that hadn't there been some happiness by taking to this path of bhakti, by living according to the principles of bhakti, by following the rules and regulations, hadn't there been some happiness, a higher level of happiness, they wouldn't have taken to this path, and they would have been happily or comfortably living in their opulent situations which the Western world provides. So that's why we can understand that it is easily understood. Pratyaksha avagam. And then it is the dharmam, or it's the principle of religion, which means, now dharmam means one's inherent characteristics, or this process of bhakti, or this process of developing loving relationship with the Lord. This is each and every living being's eternal characteristic, and because it is eternal characteristic, it is so easy, it flourishes so easily amongst different people. I mean, again taking the same example of how people of the West, they never knew about this culture of bhakti, they didn't knew about Lord Krishna, they didn't knew about chanting his names, they didn't knew about Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavatam, but when they took to this process very easily. And most of the Westerner devotees who joined during the initial period of ISKCON in the 60s and 70s, they gave up everything so quickly and they started chanting the names of Lord Krishna. So this chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, they never knew about this Hare Krishna Mahamantra, but when they were asked to do it, they easily accepted it, and they regularly chanted 16 rounds, which means 16 into 108 times they were chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra. They were reading Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, or whichever books they were asked to read. They were following the rules and regulations, like they were not eating meat, they were they were not having intoxication, they were not addicted to any sinful activities. They left all of these things which are so common in the West. And thus, from all these facts, we can understand that it is the inherent characteristic of each and every living being, whether one is born in India or one is born in America, or whether one is born in China or in Africa. We see there all the people, I mean all the devotees, whether or in whichever country they are, they have taken to this path very easily. They have taken to this path of loving God, or trying to follow these principles of bhakti. So by this we can understand this is the dharma. This process of developing the relationship with the Lord is the dharma, and this is also susukham. So it's very happy to be. It is one gets immense amount of happiness by performing these or following these principles of bhakti. So again, the various tenets of bhakti include chanting the names of Lord, dancing in front of the deities of Lord, cooking or offering foodstuffs to the Lord and accepting them as prasadam. So each and every aspect is something which gives joy. It gives joy to the people if people people get joy by singing, people get joy by dancing, people get joy by eating delicious food. So it's natural, and when the Lord is attached, or when all of these activities are performed in connection with the Lord, then the happiness manifests many more times than doing it without Lord. So if you are chanting the names of Lord, they are giving you much more happiness than if you are chanting anything, or if you are just humming to any materialistic songs. And that's why we see so many people throng to the temples, let it be temples in Vrindavan or in Dwarka or in Jagannath Puri or in Tirupati. We see thousands and thousands of people are visiting these temples just to get a glimpse of the Lord, just to chant the names of the Lord. And that's how we can understand that uh, how much mellow is there in chanting or in dancing in front of the Lord or taking prasadam of the Lord. So it is susukham. It is very much. It gives a lot of happiness. And finally, it is avyayam, which means it is everlasting. That means that if one is performing bhakti, or one is taken to this path, and maybe it may happen that he couldn't realize to the fullest extent that one has to surrender to the Lord wholeheartedly, or maybe there has been some flaws in his practices, and that's why, and maybe he has to take another birth. But even if he has to take another birth, he would get a human life, and then in the human life he would again um, he wouldn't be forgotten of his or he wouldn't lose his touch with this principles of bhakti, because Lord would bless him, and he would again continue doing chanting the names of Lord, or reading Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is one way we can understand that it is avyayam. One example is, which is commonly given, is we see there are many children who are in ISKCON. They are very good kirtaniyas from their very childhood, or they can speak out verses from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam from very childhood. So why this is so? This is so because they were devotees in their past lives, but somehow they were not able to complete this process of realization, and thus they took another birth in the human life. But from the very beginning of their life, they are into bhakti. They are chanting, they are holding kirtanas, they can influence people to buy books, and so on. So we can understand that this process of bhakti started. This is avyayam, because this is related to Lord Krishna, and Lord Krishna is transcendental. So even this process of bhakti is also transcendental. It is not bound by the laws of birth and death and forgetfulness and so on. So this is avyayam. And another thing, another aspect of this avyayam is that even one realizes his relationship with Lord, and he is given a chance to go back to the spiritual universe, but even then in the spiritual universe as well, he is again performing the bhakti, or he is engaged in the service of the Lord in one form or the other. So even one goes back to a spiritual universe, there is all these aspects of bhakti would be there. One would be able to chant the names of the Lord, one would be able to hear the pastimes of the Lord, one would be able to associate with the Lord, one would be able to associate with his devotees. So in this way, this is avyayam, or it is everlasting, and it is everlastingly giving joy to you. Now after explaining or giving all the traits of a key ingredient that is required to be on this path, so he says ashraddhadhana purusha dharmasya parantapa धर्मस्यस्य परन्तप अप्राप्य माम निवर्तन्ते मृत्यु samsara vartmani. So those who are not faithful in this devotional service cannot attain me. O conqueror of enemies. Therefore, they return to the path of birth and death in this material world. So, Lord Krishna clearly says that faith is the primary ingredient in this devotional service or on this path of bhakti, which means we have to have full faith in this or in these instructions of Bhagavad Gita, in these instructions which Lord Krishna is giving out. And what is the key instruction? The key instruction is our forgotten relationship with Lord Krishna by practicing all these paths of all these aspects of devotion service. And we might not have faith at this point in time, but we have to gradually build on that faith by performing this or by performing all these aspects of bhakti. And another important aspect is that we have to associate with the like-minded souls, or we have to associate with devotees. So, because if we want to be devoted to Lord Krishna, then we have to associate with devotees, because by in association of devotees we would be able to keep hold, we would be able to remain steadfast on this path of bhakti, and by association of devotees we would be also be able to understand various aspects of bhakti. So faith is important. To have to try to build faith on these instructions is important, and the most effective way of building on this faith is to constantly associate with devotees. And there are various ISKCON centers which are present in most of the major cities and also in smaller towns, where one can go regularly, and generally on weekends there are programs throughout the days. There one can take part in kirtanas, one can accept prasadam, one can hear to the discourses which are given on Gita and Bhagavatam, and this way the association would build up, the faith, your faith in Krishna consciousness or in this process of bhakti would build up. So these are the two important aspects which Lord Krishna is giving out to, so that we can have or we can take to this most confidential knowledge of bhakti. So now in few verses Lord Krishna would bring out some of the opulences of his divine majesty. So here Lord Krishna says, Maya tatam idam sarvam jagad avyakta murtina matsthani sarva bhutani najaham teshu avasthita. By me, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. So, one meaning of this verse is, as Lord Krishna clearly says, that He is pervading in this entire material universe, this entire universe, and we cannot see Him with our material eyes. But the another meaning is that if we want to see Him, then we have to develop this bhakti or this attachment towards Lord Krishna. And when we develop this attachment towards Lord Krishna, then we would be able to see Lord Krishna everywhere. So in the various phenomena, in the various happenings of our life, in everything we would be able to see Lord Krishna. So this is the hidden meaning of this verse, that if we take to this process of bhakti, then gradually we would be able to see Lord Krishna in each and every happening that takes place in our lives. And so in the entire universe we would be able to see Lord Krishna. And now, although he says that Lord Krishna is in an unmanifested form, pervading everywhere, But people shouldn't think that because he is pervading everywhere, so he doesn't have a personal existence. And that is why he says that although he is pervading throughout the universe, but he is not, or he is, his personal form is there, but his personal form is aloof from, or his personal form is different from this form by which he is pervading the entire universe. So quite beautiful. So his personal, he is present in his personal form as well in this in spiritual universe, and he is also present in his unmanifested form throughout the material universe. Verse number 5, न च मत्स्थानि भूतानि पश्य मे योगमेश्वरं भूतभृन्न च भूतस्थो mamatma bhuta bhavana. And yet everything that is created does not rest in me. Behold my mystic opulence. Although I am the maintainer of all living entities, and although I am everywhere, I am not a part of this cosmic manifestation, for myself is the very source of creation. So, the message which Lord Krishna is trying to give here is that although Lord Krishna is the maintainer of this entire universe, but he doesn't have to uh, physically arrange for the maintenance of the innumerable living beings. So he doesn't have to engage any of senses, or he doesn't have to engage in a way like we have to do to perform any activity. So uh, if I have to move a table, then I have to physically have to push the table or have to pull the table. But for him, all the things which are happening within this universe, he's performing by simply willing, or by his simple thinking. All of the various phenomena in this material universe is taking place, and that is why, although he is the maintainer of this universe, he is not actively engaged within this cosmic manifestation. So this is the message Lord Krishna is giving to Arjuna ji. यथा आकाशो स्थितो नित्यं वायु सर्वत्र गो महान् तथा सर्वाणि भूतानि मत्स्थानीति उपधारया. Understand that as the mighty wind blowing everywhere rests always in the sky, all created beings rest in me. So here Lord Krishna is giving an example that just like the wind which blows everywhere, and which is the reason for various phenomena like the rains or the storms, but even it's so mighty, but it still is resting in the sky, the giant sky. And similarly, there might be innumerable living beings who are engaged in different activities, but ultimately they are all resting within Lord. सर्वभूतानि कौन्तेय प्रकृतिं यान्ति मामिकं कल्पशय पुनस्तानि कल्पादौ विसृजामि अहम्. O son of Kunti, at the end of millennium, all material manifestations enter into my nature, and at the beginning of another millennium, by my potency, I create them again. So here, by the millennium, it means the lifetime of Brahma. So Brahma ji lives for 100 years, but the count of those 100 years is a bit different. So for example, his one day itself is in about in in around 43 billion years. 43 billion years. And in this way we can understand the life of Brahma is quite long, and then at the end of the life of Brahma, Lord Krishna is wrapping up this material universe, and again after wrapping it up, then when the cycle of this material universe starts again he manifests them only by his will. So uh, this gives us a glimpse of how majestic Lord Krishna is, that by his simple will this entire manifestation is created, and then again it is dissolved after a certain period of time. And he would also comment about the material nature in this verse. So prakritim swam avasthabhya visrajami puna puna bhutagramam imam kritsnam avasham prakritir vashat. The whole cosmic order is under me. Under my will it is automatically manifested again and again. Under my will it is annihilated at the end. So again Lord Krishna mentions here clearly that this whole material nature is under his supervision, and it is only by his will that it is getting manifested and it is getting annihilated. But one thing which we need to understand, that although the universes are getting created and they are getting dissolved, but the living beings are getting different births because of the results of their karma. So if one is doing good karmas, then he will he or she will get a better body, or a chance to take birth. The soul will get a position in a better body. But if he performs not so good activities, then he will have to take a birth in a species which is lowly, or the life of that particular living being would be straddled with many difficulties. So although the universes are manifested and unmanifested by Lord's will, but whatever destination a living being attains, it's because of one's own karma. न च मां तानि कर्माणि निबध्नान्ति धनञ्जय उदासीनवदासीनम् अशक्तं तेषु कर्मसु. O Dhananjaya, all this work cannot bind me. I am ever detached from all these material activities, seated as though neutral. So, as you can understand, that although Lord Krishna is responsible for this material universe, but as he is not directly engaged in the creation and the destruction of this universe, so he is not responsible for these material activities. Rather, he is always engaged in his pastimes with his dearest devotees, and thus he has nothing to do with, or he's not responsible, or he is not bound to get any actions for the creation of the universe or the destruction of the universe, because ultimately it's all within his control. So here Lord Krishna says the same thing. मयाध्यक्षेण प्रकृति सूयते सचराचरम हेतुनानेन कौन्तेय जगत विपरिवर्तते. This material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, producing all moving and non-moving beings. Under its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. So, very clearly we can understand that this material universe and all the phenomena are the energies of Lord, and they are working, and all the phenomena of the which are happening within this material universe being is being manifested, or it is being controlled by those energies. So again we can understand that Lord Krishna has delegated all the responsibilities of this material universe to various demigods and demigoddesses, and that is why Srila Prabhupada here mentioned, under its rule this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. Avajananti mamudha manushim tanamashritam param bhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature as the Supreme Lord of all that be. So, Lord Krishna, when he descends to this material universe, he takes a body which appears like to that of a human, but this doesn't mean that Lord Krishna has become a human being. So Lord Krishna always maintains his transcendence, which means that his material body, or I beg your pardon, the body which he takes is not material, it is completely spiritual, and that's why we see that Lord Krishna is performing such superhuman pastimes, like he is killing so many demons even during his own during his childhood. Then he lifts the Govardhana hill, the mighty mountain, on the tip of his finger when he was just 7 years old. So clearly these activities cannot be performed by you or me. So because he is the Lord, and because he is the controller of everything, he can perform all of these wonderful activities without the slightest of effort, and thus he is transcendental. He is not a human, but there are some ignorant people who still frame him to be a human being, and which is pure ignorance. Now, apart from the pastimes which he has played, there is a logical angle to how we can understand that Lord Krishna is beyond the rules of this material world. And the logic is that Lord Krishna says that if one surrenders to him, then one would get rid of this material universe, or one can get rid of the laws of this material universe, that means to take birth, go through the lifespan, and then die, and then repeat this again and again. So Lord Krishna can bestow the mercy of releasing one from this cycle of birth and death. So if one is powerful enough to give this kind of benediction, or to get rid of the clutches of this material energy, then how that same Supreme Lord be influenced by the material energies? Which so if I rephrase it, if is giving you the protection from the material energy, that means he is above the material energies, and that is why he can give you protection from the material energies. So if he is superior to material energies, then then this is purely illogical to think him or to think his form as material. So, but unfortunately, there are some people who don't understand this logical view as well, and thus he is warning all such living beings who are not following his instructions. So he says, Moghasha mogha karmano mogha jnana vicetasaha rakshasim asurim chaiva prakritim mohinim shita. So those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demonic and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. So this means that who are not having faith in the words of Lord Krishna, who are deriding the higher authority of Lord Krishna, so with this defiance, whatever they do in this life, whatever they do to protect themselves or their kith and kin, ultimately it is not going to yield any result, because they are defying the supreme authority, and they are expecting that things would go on in the right fashion. So that won't happen, because they are in an illusion, the illusion that by their activities, by their persistence, they can be the king, they can be the master of their destiny, and they would be attaining a permanent place of happiness by their own conceptions or activities. So all of the activities of such demoniac or atheistic people is yielding to nothing, and thus Lord Krishna is clearly mentioning that their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge, everything would be defeated. Now, on the other hand, he speaks about those who are surrendered to him. So he says, Mahatmanastu mam partha devim prakritim ashrita bhajanya manaso gyatva bhutadim avyayam. O son of Pritha, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as a Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. So, here the traits of the pure devotees of Lords have been mentioned. So, the first thing which is mentioned is they are fully engaged in devotional service because they know Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And because they are engaged in the service of Lord Krishna, so Lord Krishna also reciprocates with him, and thus he bestows them the mercy that they are not touched by the material nature. Rather, they are always under the guidance of the divine nature. So, in other words, or if I quote an example, there have been various Vaishnavite devotees of Lord who have performed miraculous feats. Like, if we take the example of His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, he himself, he went to the West at the age of 70, just to fulfill the mission of his spiritual master, because spiritual master had told him that because Srila Prabhupada had taken education from a good college, and he was learned in English, and that's why his spiritual master asked him to preach this message of bhakti in the Western world. And just to carry out that mission, Srila Prabhupada went to West at the advanced age of 70, and he didn't have any resources, he didn't have any monetary support, he didn't hardly knew anyone except the person who had helped him sponsor the visa. And even despite such challenges, he was able to draw the hearts of countless followers of the United States. I mean, we are talking of the United States of 60s and 70s, and at that point of time hardly there was any interaction between United States and India, and people hardly knew about the culture of India. But even then, because Srila Prabhupada was a totally surrendered soul to Lord Krishna, and thus Lord Krishna had favored him with the mercy of spreading this message, and that is why we see there are thousands and thousands of practitioners of this bhakti yoga who are from this Western world. It's all because Srila Prabhupada was under this divine nature, he was guided by this divine nature, and through him this message of devotional service has propagated through all the countries of the world. And not only he propagated this message, he was also able to enthuse them to propagate this message to others. So through him many other souls were enthused to take up this preaching mission, and then they went on to countries like United Kingdom, Germany, in the Far East, and they went everywhere and they preached this mission, they preached this knowledge of bhakti. And that is how we can see that in a short span of 11-12 years, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness grew from nothing to more than 100 centers, temples, farm communities, restaurants, and so on. So in this way we can understand that what is the power of one who is dedicated to Lord Krishna, and what is the power of being under the guidance of divine nature. So this is just one example of the glories of this being totally devoted to Lord Krishna, and how the mercy of Lord Krishna works through such devoted souls. Verse 14. Satatam kiteyanto mam yatantascha dridavata namasyantascha mam bhaktya nityayukta upasate. Always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great devotion, bowing down before me, the great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. So the great devotees of Lord, or the Mahatmas, are always engaged in glorifying the pastimes of Lord, the names of Lord, and they themselves are practicing all the rules and regulations in their life, like they are chanting fixed number of rounds of Mahamantra, they are reading Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, they are following all the rules and restrictions, like they are performing Ekadashi, they are abiding by the principles of this bhakti. And in this way, by constantly being or striving on this path of bhakti, ultimately they would attain the supreme kingdom of Lord. So this is the great life and the greatest destination one can attain by being on this path of bhakti. ज्ञानयज्ञेन चापि अन्ये यजन्तो मामुपासते एकत्वेन पृथक्त्वेन बहुधा विश्वतोमुखम्. Here Lord Krishna is explaining or mentioning about those living beings who are not directly engaged in the service of Lord Krishna, but either they themselves consider them to be a Lord and make a worship, impose a worship of their own self, or they conceive a form of Supreme Lord and they try to impose the worship of those gods and demigods and demigoddesses, or they worship the supreme, or they worship the universal form of the Lord. But Lord Krishna would again emphasize the worship of Lord Krishna himself. So here he says, aham kratur aham yajna swadhaham aham aushadham mantroham aham evagyam aham agnir aham hutam. So Lord Krishna says, but it is I who am the ritual, I the sacrifice, the offering to the ancestors, the healing herb, the transcendental chant. I am the butter, and the fire and the offering. He further says, Pitaham asya jagato mata dhata pitamaha vedyam pavitram omkara riksam yajur evacha. I am the father of this universe, the mother, the support, and the grandsire. I am the object of the knowledge, the purifier, and the syllable Om. I am also the Rig, Sam, and Yajur Veda. So, in the previous verses, we already understood that how Lord Krishna is the reason of the manifestation of this universe. So, we can easily understand that he is the father and mother of this universe. And then he is the support and the grandsire. So, whoever people we are associated with, like our parents or our kith and kin or our relatives, they are living only because Lord Krishna is present within them in the form of super soul. And if the super soul is not there, the soul also wouldn't survive in the material body. So, because Lord Krishna is present in the form of Paramatma, the support, we can interact with them, we can see people are living and moving and doing everything. It's only because Paramatma is there residing in each and every living being. And also, he is the object of knowledge. We know about the various Vedas, and the essence of Vedas, or the core information or the core knowledge of the Vedas, is ultimately to surrender to Lord Krishna. Although there have been various ways prescribed, because not everyone is on the same level, and that's why various ways have been prescribed in the Vedas. But the ultimate goal of the Vedas is to surrender to Lord Krishna, and that is why Lord Krishna says he is the Rig, Sam, Yajur Veda. Verse 18, Gatir Bharta Prabhu Sakshi Nivasa Saranam Shruhet Prabhava Pralaya Sthanam Nidhanam Bijam Avyayam. So Lord Krishna says that I am the goal, the sustainer, the master, the witness, the abode, the refuge, and the most dear friend. I am the creation and annihilation, the basis of everything, the resting place of the eternal seed. So, Lord Krishna is our Supreme Father, and we have always been, or our supreme duty or our eternal duty is that we should be serving Lord in one form or the another. And that is why our goal or our destination is that we go back, we are able to realize our relationship with the Lord, and we engage ourselves in loving service to the Lord, and finally we are able, and thus we would be able to finally go back to his abode. So that is how he is the goal of all the living beings, and he is the sustainer, the master, the witness. So all of this we understood. For example, we understood how from him the universe is manifesting, and it is sustained by him, and it is ultimately dissolved also by him. And thus he is a sustainer, or he is a master. And then we know that he is the Paramatma. He is living within every living being as the Paramatma, and he is witnessing all the activities which we are doing, whether we are able to hide it from the whole universe, but we won't be able to hide it from Lord Krishna in the form of Paramatma. And then he is the abode, or he is the refuge, because this material universe is perishable in nature. This human life is also might last for 70-80 years at max. So only when we realize that we are not this body and we are the soul, and we have to go back to the spiritual universe, only then we would be able to get a permanent abode. And thus there is no other abode, there is no other refuge than to take shelter of Lord Krishna. And ultimately he is our most dear friend, because we can come across many such well-wishers on this earth, or we can come across we can take to the worship of various demigods and demigoddesses, but the benefit provided by our earthly well-wishers or by those demigods and demigoddesses are temporary in nature, because both our well-wishers on this earth and the demigods and demigoddesses, they themselves are temporary in nature. And also because they are the product of this material universe, so they cannot perceive what is the highest benefit for all of us. And the highest benefit for all of us is to understand our true self and try to get out of this shackle of this material universe. And because they are thus not able to understand this highest truth, so thus whatever advices they give, whatever counseling they give, or whatever benedictions they give, they are either temporary in nature, or they are not going to help us ultimately. They are not going to give us the ultimate gain. And that is why the counseling, the benedictions, the instructions which are provided by Lord Krishna are the supreme beneficial for all of us, and hence he is our dearest friend. And thus if we have faith in our dearest friend, then let us try to follow the instructions which he mentions in this one and the previous verse, and try to follow as much as possible, and thus make our lives successful. So with this message I would close today's session. If you have any doubts, please let me know, please contact me, and I hope I would be able to help you on this journey. Hare Krishna.